class. Today we're going to start working on one of the most important skills needed to create our social issue murals that we'll be starting on soon. We're going to work on replicating a composition using the grid method. The grid method can be used to replicate a composition original size, or it can be used to enlarge a composition, as I'm going to show you today. This is one of the most important skills you're going to need, and this is practice for when we begin our murals next week. So in front of you, you should have two worksheets. You should have one of The Flower Carrier by Diego Rivera and one of Agrarian Leader Zapata by Diego Rivera. So you should have two worksheets in front of you, and you should also have a pencil and an eraser handy. We're going to start with the worksheet of Diego Rivera's Flower Carrier. So as you start with the grid method is all about breaking up the composition into simpler shapes, and it's about using the grid as a reference point for where the shapes and lines of the composition fall on the grid. So first, looking at each one of the squares of the grid as its own composition is really going to help you draw it out. So if we're looking at this square of the basket and the wrap of the man, that's this square on the grid, you can see that it's really only consisting of two straight lines to draw that area of the composition. And you can use the grid itself as reference points to see what is the angle of the line of that section, how does it relate to the other sections of the grid surrounding it, how does it pass through these squares here. It's all about using a reference point, and it's all about simplifying the composition so it's easier for you to replicate. Alright, so get out your worksheet of the Flower Carrier by Diego Rivera, and we're going to draw it along together. So draw it on your grid as I draw it on my grid. So you can really start anywhere on the composition, but it's probably going to be best to start along the top row or in one of the corners. I'm going to start in the top corner. So if we're looking at this top corner, it has the line of the flowers is a little more than halfway. It starts about right here on the page, and then it goes up and it goes over almost through the top line here, like this. And now I'm going into the next square. So we got that square done. As you can see, it's much easier to draw. This composition is very easy. It was just one line. So now we're going to the next square, which makes another round shape, another round organic line that goes across almost to the top of the composition like this. Then as we go over to the next line, we have a few more items in, but we have the line of the flowers continuing down, and then we have the line of the basket that comes over and straight down and bisects the line here. And then we have the line of the basket itself, which is a pretty steep incline down like this. How are you doing? Getting it? Excellent. Okay, so now we're going to draw the shoulder of the lady. That's the next part of the composition, and it comes across like this. And then as we're going next to, so this is the most complicated square we've had to draw so far. I'm gonna clip my paper here so I don't hold it. We're gonna draw the lady's face and her other shoulder going down. So probably how I would start this is to get her shoulder in, how that comes across here. And then her head is almost a circular shape. It's kind of, there's a little divot here where it comes in, but I would start just with a circle. You want to make sure you're drawing simplified shapes first, big simplified shapes, and then moving towards more complicated and adding more detail in. So I would just draw her head in as a circle like this. And then we can go back in and kind of refine the shape a little bit more. And we can add the line of her hair, which is kind of like you can see the bangs. And then maybe the line of her eyes. And her eyes like this. And her nose comes down like this from her eyes. Alright, so that's the top section, and it was very easy to draw that out. And now we can work our way down to the rest of the composition. So as we go across, this one is a little bit more complicated of a composition. You kind of have to look at a little bit more shapes and more reference points, because there's the hat, there's part of the man's face, there's his shoulder, the flowers, and the basket all in this section of the composition. So I would probably start here with the hat, actually. Put this so it's out of the way. So it looks like the hat shape kind of comes up like this. It starts about right here on the line, as you can see, and then it goes up and over and around like this. It's kind of like a square and a circle mixed together, like a rounded square shape. Then the brim of his hat comes across and around like that into an ellipse shape. The hat's probably the most complicated thing to draw on this composition. Then his face comes down. We have the shoulder coming out like that. The basket itself coming like this. And then now we can connect our line that we drew for the flowers in this portion. We can connect it down like this. Do you have any questions so far?
How much detail should we add to the flowers?
So the flowers, you really shouldn't add this much detail at the drawing out phase, especially when we go to draw our mural project. The flowers will be added with paint later, so to add a lot of graphite pencil is really just gonna muddy your drawing and make it more complicated and take you a lot more time to draw out. So at this stage, it's just about getting the simple shapes down and making sure your composition is proportioned correctly. You don't need to add too much detail. That looks good. It looks like you're really understanding it.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, now that you've had some practice with the flower carrier, I want you to get out your second worksheet, The Agrarian Leader Zapata, also by Diego Rivera. And I'd like you to start replicating that image as onto your grid, redrawing it out. Try to work on as much as you can for the rest of the class period, and then the rest is homework, and it will be due our following class period. How's it going?
I'm having trouble drawing the horse's head.
Okay, let me see. So if I'm looking at it, the horse's head is comprised of a big curve here. So I'd probably start with that part, going down. See how it goes, like basically right through the corner of that part of the grid. And then down here, like this. And then the face of the horse is really just a long triangle. So you can get your triangle shape first, and then add in the eye and the ears afterward.
Oh, thank you. That was very helpful.
Yeah, you're welcome.